Once upon a time, there was a house that stood alone on a hilltop. It was a grand and imposing house, built in the Victorian style with turrets and towers that reached towards the sky. But despite its grandeur, the house had been abandoned for many years, and it had fallen into disrepair. The windows were boarded up, the roof was leaking, and the gardens were overgrown with weeds. No one knew who had lived in the house or why they had left. The local people whispered that the house was cursed, and that strange things happened there at night, but no one had ever dared to investigate. One day, a young woman named Rachel came to the village. She was a writer, and she was looking for a quiet place to work on her latest book. When she saw the abandoned house on the hill, she knew that she had found the perfect place. Rachel approached the house, and as she climbed the hill, she felt a sense of unease. The house looked even more imposing up close, and she wondered what secrets it held. She pushed open the gate and walked up the path to the front door. The wood was rotting, and she had to push hard to open it. As she stepped inside, she was hit by a musty smell, and the sound of the door closing echoed through the empty halls. Rachel looked around the ground floor of the house. The rooms were large and grand, with high ceilings and ornate plasterwork, but everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, and the furniture was covered in cobwebs. She decided to start by cleaning the ground floor, so she set to work with a mop and bucket. As she worked, she began to feel a sense of unease. The house was so quiet, and the sound of her mop echoed through the halls. She kept turning around, half expecting to see someone standing behind her, but there was no one there. When she had finished cleaning the ground floor, she decided to explore the rest of the house. She climbed the sweeping staircase to the first floor and found a long corridor with many doors leading off it. She opened one door and found a room filled with antique furniture. She opened another door and found a dusty library, with shelves of books that looked as though they hadn't been touched in years. Rachel was fascinated by the house, and she spent many hours exploring it. As she worked, she began to notice strange things happening. She would hear footsteps echoing through the halls when she knew she was alone. She would find doors that she was sure she had closed had opened again, and she would catch glimpses of something moving out of the corner of her eye, only to turn and find nothing there. At first, Rachel tried to ignore these strange occurrences, but as they became more frequent, she began to feel increasingly uneasy. She started to wonder if the stories about the house being cursed were true. One night, as she was working late in the library, she heard a sound outside. It was a soft tapping, like something was trying to get in. Rachel felt a sense of fear, and she hid behind a bookshelf. The tapping continued, and she realized that it was coming from the window. She cautiously approached the window and saw a figure outside, looking in at her. Rachel screamed and ran from the room. She spent the rest of the night huddled in her bed, too scared to move. The next day, she decided that she had had enough. She packed her bags and left the house, vowing never to return. Years passed, and the house on the hill remained abandoned. But it became a place of fascination for the local people, who would often gather outside the gate to tell stories about the mysterious house and the strange occurrences that had been reported there over the years. Some said that the house was haunted by the ghosts of its former occupants, who had met a tragic end. Others claimed that the house was the site of black magic rituals, and that evil spirits still lingered there. Despite the rumors, no one dared to enter the house again. It became known as the Forgotten House, a place that was best avoided. But there was one person who was determined to uncover the truth about the house and the stories that surrounded it. Her name was Sarah, and she was a journalist. She had heard the stories about the Forgotten House, and she was intrigued. She decided to investigate, to see if there was any truth to the rumors that had been circulating for so long. Sarah approached the house on a bright, sunny day. She was not afraid, and she felt a sense of excitement as she pushed open the gate and walked up the path to the front door. The house looked just as imposing as it had before, but she was determined to find out what lay inside. She pushed open the door, and the musty smell hit her, but she was not deterred. She began to explore the house, room by room. She found the grand drawing room, with its ornate fireplace and dusty chandelier. She found the library, with its shelves of ancient books, and she found the bedrooms, with their peeling wallpaper and creaky beds. As she worked, she began to feel a sense of unease. The house was so quiet, and the sound of her footsteps echoed through the halls, but she pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets of the Forgotten House. It was late in the afternoon when Sarah found what she had been looking for. She was in the attic, surrounded by old trunks and boxes. She opened one of the trunks and found a collection of old photographs. They showed the family who had lived in the house many years before. Sarah was fascinated by the photographs. She saw the grandeur of the house in its heyday, with the family gathered on the steps, smiling for the camera. But as she looked closer, she saw something that made her blood run cold. In one of the photographs, there was a figure lurking in the background. It was a tall, shadowy figure, with a face that was half hidden in the darkness. Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she looked at the photograph. She knew that she had uncovered something important. She spent the rest of the day in the attic, going through the trunks and boxes, looking for more clues. As the sun began to set, she found a diary hidden in the bottom of one of the trunks. It was written by the woman who had lived in the house many years ago. Sarah read the diary eagerly, and as she did, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. She learned that the family who had lived in the house had been wealthy and respected in the local community. But as she read on, she discovered that there had been dark secrets hidden behind the facade of respectability. The woman who had written the diary had been the daughter of the family. She had seen things that no child should ever have to see, and she had lived in fear for much of her life. She had seen her mother's mental health deteriorate, and she had seen her father turn to drink. But worst of all, she had seen the shadowy figure that Sarah had glimpsed in the photograph. It was a man who had once worked for her father, a man who had been dismissed for stealing. The man had become obsessed with the family and had been lurking around the house, watching their every move.